maybe we jump into the first segment, which is to try and understand, right, what is the linkage between operations and scale? Like you said, 2.5 million people, 30,000 pin codes, complex condition. Clearly, it's a difficult challenge, right, to meet. And yet, the company does it. And for all of y'all who are here, if you ever go to LinkedIn and you see what people have to say about Beto, clearly customers also love the product, they love the service, and it's really doing them some good. So maybe jumping into the first segment, like couple of questions, right? One, when you think about operations or operations excellence, right? What does it mean in the context of a business like Beto, which is in the healthcare space? And tagging on to that, a lot of people, when they observe the product or they know about it, they think of it, as a digital health business, which it is. But often the people and the operational aspect that happens in the background is not obvious, right, to somebody looking at it for the first time from the outside in. So maybe tell us a little bit about, what role ops and people play at Beto, right? So what is ops to you? What is ops in healthcare, in that context? And then what role does ops play in Beto? Maybe we start with that and then get into some of the other questions.
Yeah, I think in that short sentence or paragraph, you asked me a lot of questions and insightful ones too. But maybe I'll begin with just saying that, you cannot scale chaos. Because you said, how does ops help in scaling? I think, first of all, if there is a chaotic process, there is no use of scaling that. Unfortunately, I've done the mistake several times in the past of doing that, but realized time and again that there is no fun in doing it, and you're causing every stakeholder in that equation unnecessary heartache. So I think, hence, for us, what is very critical is we get things right first and then scale. And healthcare, while you look at Beto, and some of you may be familiar with it, it's actually a digital care ecosystem for everything diabetes at the center of the universe. It might appear there's an app, and then there are different pillars around it. Our remote monitoring through our these connected devices. I can show you a couple of them. Once the data comes in, then this is an ops in itself, and I'm going to talk about it in some time. But this small little device, while it just appears that this is small and just plugs into the phone, and then you start monitoring your sugar levels, it leads to a massive operational solve that we needed to have for Beto. But essentially, remote monitoring being one element, of course, then virtual coaching through and the doctor consultations being the second. The entire commerce layer of Beto, where we have a curated shop and ecosystem, and finally making sure medicines get delivered to an individual on time, their adherence is proper. It's the whole loop, that a person 360-degree loop that we needed to have built, so that this individual who may be a diabetic and comes into the ecosystem, from ensuring remote monitoring, ensuring they get the right continuity of awareness and education, getting the right diagnosis and treatment from our doctors and coaches, which is all virtual, ensuring that all their supplies reach them at home, and do it in a way that is very affordable for the individual. You can imagine, is not only tech, right? It is fueled by tech, and of course the interfacing has to be product, because that makes the whole experience much more simpler and effective. But there's a whole background of operations built around it. So when just this device, just making sure that every time you insert it, there's an IMEI code, and we are able to actually get the information of the patient, so that then if from the time it leaves our warehouse. So let's say you buy this device, and the when the warehouse is shipping this device, the barcode is scanned, we know exactly whose house it has reached, so that we can give them the right customer experience, right? So, and then once they start monitoring, we know who this customer is, when they bought this device, what troubles they may have had in terms of that entire logistics of the device itself, and then were they able to activate. So some older people, let's say 60-65-year-old, may have some issues in connecting this device and utilizing them, to ensuring that they're actively monitoring and then handing over, if the intervention, if somebody's sugar levels go up or down, through the care team, which is our coaches and the team of doctors, to ensuring that then when the supplies are running out, we refill them proactively through our warehouses, to ensuring the customer support is available when, as and when the individual needs, to ensuring finally this whole health, this entire loop is driving what eventually for us health outcomes for an individual, right? So that's the golden metric that we chase, but it can't be done if you don't have all these inputs, and every input that we're talking about is actually got an operations layer to it. And I can give you many examples, but just this process of ensuring, for instance, this device reaches a person within a couple of days, or the strips, when you're using this device, there are these test strips, and they run out, and ensuring that by the time the person's strips are running out, they receive these, because that has a major ramification in the adherence. So it's like you all use toothpaste, right? And when it's about to run out, you will squeeze it till the very end, and you'll maybe पहले आप जब I can switch to Hindi, no,
Yeah,
occasionally.
you can
So
right.
when you put the toothpaste when it's full, then you'll normally see कि पूरा भरते हो आप, और फिर जब कम होता रहता है तो थोड़ा थोड़ा होता रहता है, इन द सेंस दैट वो क्वार्टर वो जो ब्रिसल्स होते हैं उसके क्वार्टर पे आप भरते हो. So it's the same way here. If you run out of strips or you run out of medication, uh, you may lose the patient's adherence, which actually has a consequence on outcome. So, hence, having a very seamless operation and tying everything and delivering that experience, of course, through an interface, which is our app, and utilizing technology to be able to tie all these elements of the operation so they come together for a customer to deliver customer excellence, to deliver health outcomes, and of course for the business, eventually efficiency translating into profitability. I think it's everything that needs to work together. You can't have problems getting solved in isolation. Of course, now again, Rome was never built in one day, so it's not going to be that you will solve everything on day one. But your aspiration to be able to do that and solve quickly is what differentiates or separates businesses who will eventually do grow significantly more than some of the others.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. I think what you just said at the last is honestly the ethos with which Shobhata and I wanted to start Ops Matters, right? Ki there was a difference that we saw between startups who scale and startups who don't. And a large part of that scalability aspect comes from being able to, you know, convert chaos into process, right? And be able to figure out stuff that can multiply and that can grow. And I think this is a fantastic example of that. On that line, right, now that you're coming up almost to a decade of Bito, and obviously the company has evolved massively since you started to where it is today. Could you tell us a little about, when you went about designing some of these operational aspects, right? And when end up designing the customer experience, the goals that you set for the business, right? How did you sort of over time build the ops, to prepare for this sort of scale, right? And can you give us some examples of maybe what has changed, say 10 years ago, 5 years ago to today, as the business grew, as the complexities increased, how have operations evolved? And how should people think about designing their operations in the companies that they're working at or the problems that they're trying to solve today?
So I'll maybe answer that, Rohit, with two examples. One is, the Beto virtual model, which we've been building over a period of time, and how, if I jog my memory back, several years ago to today, how that has scaled. And more recently, recent in the sense about 4 5 months back, we've started our offline presence in terms of launching physical clinics in tehsils and smaller areas, and so that's actually in a very small startup journey of itself. And my learnings over the last several years, and perhaps having done things not the way they should have, but now translating, at least you're always more smarter in retrospect, to the clinics. I can tell you a little bit about how I'm going about doing things differently this time.
Awesome.
But the early days of, I would say, any organization, especially at Beto, given healthcare eventually is going to be 80-90% operations. Any space you pick up, I don't think it's ever going to not have operation, and this is where you're building the moat as well, right? So while AI and app and everything is, like I said, very very important and useful, the moat at the back end is actually your operations and how you build efficiency into it. So the early days are important, but I, at least now that we are translating that knowledge onto the clinics, I prefer a lean ops. So I want to make sure that we're learning fast, and so operations is not necessarily being there's no fancy operations at this stage. It's just to ensure that what we need to do to be able to throw out important results, we understand what the critical inputs for those are. So for example, in the clinic setup, what we realized very quickly was that having clinics about 50 kilometers from a division makes a lot more sense. Having the doctor, however, come from 50 kilometers makes sense, because they don't actually have the doctor, but the doctor can't be too far off. But having clinics within 40-50 kilometers of each other, make sure that one doctor can be utilized for a weekly OPD in clinic A, B, C, D, etc. Right. So but it, hence I wanted to keep it lean. Otherwise I could have we had the choice, and of course the capital is available to make sure that every clinic is manned with a doctor, but that wouldn't have been very prudent, because we would have ended up hiring many more doctors, and who knows, eventually it may not have worked out and we would have to request them to leave. But having in your early days very lean ops, so that you can learn fast, iterate fast. And I think even when I look at the clinics now and Beto, 10 years ago, Beto Sugar Clinics and Beto as a digital solution 10 years ago, the early part of your ops has to be founder led, I think and believe, because it's many of the things are in your mind. You're actually the one who's absorbing everything from the field, from the research, etc. So you can't just outsource ops and say, okay, I'll hire an ops expert and they'll do it. So I feel lean ops is extremely important in the earlier days, and founder-led control is very, very crucial. But as you grow, and now perhaps now the 5-6 months of having had the experience of clinics, and when I jog my memory back a year or two of Pito, SOPs start becoming important. Getting your field ops team who are very, very solid become important. Having tracking and dashboard becomes important. Like I said, now when we started off, we didn't have all the tracking of when we're sending the device, to whom are we sending the device, when they are starting to monitor, etc. But then in this phase we built up the tracking, and was so robust that we knew exactly what is happening. So I'll take the case of clinics again, because this is fresh in memory. Pretty much from when a customer comes in and registers with what we call our clinic coordinator, he has an app, to this patient walking in to meet the doctor, to then walking out, going home, to their content engagement journey, to their dietitian and virtual educator reaching out to them, everything is actually tracked. Is So the whole customer journey we have complete transparency and understanding on. And why it is important is because then where the drop offs might be happening, which are the customer cohorts who you want to focus on. It also throws out what are the important metrics that you must keep optimizing on. So for example, in our business in general, diabetes, right, patient retention and lifetime value is one of the most crucial things, because a person who's coming in, unless you engage with them over a period of time, you're not going to make much of a dent, neither in their health nor in their pockets. So it's eventually you will need to be able to make sure your dashboards, your tracking, and your SOPs, your field team is top notch. And then once you've established that, your baseline is pretty clear, your unit economics are well understood, that's the time then you can press on the accelerator, and then you scale both your business and your ops.
Got it. Awesome. No, this is super helpful. I think bunch of like very, very interesting nuggets across different, contexts of offline, digital, the entire piece, right? And I think it's super interesting to note like all of these different operational implications, right? Have a very clear, even though it's delivered digitally in a product format to the customer, the back-end operations here are having a very critical impact on that digital product experience, right?
Yeah.
And your ability to directly work closely with customers.